If you trace the physical journey of the device you're listening to right now.
Or even just the shoes by your door.
Exactly, yeah. Or the coffee mug on your desk. You'd find that almost every single object in your life spent weeks on a vessel and, eventually funneled through a global port.
Right, and we tend to view these places as just these static industrial backdrops.
Yeah, just vast expanses of asphalt and giant cranes.
But they're really the invisible circulatory system of the global economy. And the only time we actually pay attention to them is when that system suffers a heart attack.
Absolutely. So today we are taking a deep dive into a colossal stack of sources. We've got this incredibly detailed white paper, corporate climate strategies, case studies from around the world, and even a YouTube transcript breaking down port logistics.
It's a lot of material.
It is. And our mission today is to look at how these historically dirty, carbon-heavy engines of trade are unexpectedly becoming like laboratories for global climate action.
And I just want to point out, the scale of this transition is staggering. We are talking about retrofitting the infrastructure of global capitalism in real time.
Yeah, and we're going to skip the dense textbook jargon today. We really want to get right into the mechanisms, the aha moments of how this supply chain is physically transforming.
Which is fascinating to see unfold.
It really is, but
Yeah.
to understand the sheer speed of this shift, we have to look at the motivation first. Because the maritime industry isn't just undertaking this multi-billion-dollar transition purely out of the goodness of their hearts, right?
No, not at all. They are doing it as a matter of raw survival.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this. Are we just talking about physical water rising over a dock, or is there a bigger geopolitical domino effect here?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is so much more than just a flooded dock. That is really the foundation of everything we're discussing today. There's a study in our sources conducted by the climate analytics firm Jupiter Intelligence, working alongside consultants at Guidehouse.
Right, the one where they analyze 50 major global ports.
Exactly, across various climate scenarios. And the financial threat they uncovered is just sobering. They identified $81 billion of global trade that is at risk annually, strictly from climate hazards.
Wow. And 81 billion is just the value of the actual goods sitting in the crosshairs, right? Like the boxes themselves.
Correct. When you factor in the broader economic activity, like the logistics, the local jobs, the transit networks, that number jumps to at least $122 billion at risk every single year.
That's just a massive vulnerability.
It really is. But what's genuinely fascinating is how that risk breaks down. Because currently, 50% of the physical climate risk to these ports is driven by wind.
Which, makes intuitive sense.
Yeah.
If towering cranes and steel boxes stack like 6 high,
Yeah.
a severe windstorm basically turns a terminal into a hazard zone.
Exactly. But the second biggest threat, making up 30% of the risk, is extreme cold.
I have to admit, that caught me totally off guard. When we talk about climate threats to a port, my mind goes straight to hurricanes or sea level rise. How does a freeze shut down a port more effectively than a flood?
Well, it really comes down to the metallurgy and the fluids that keep all these massive machines running.
Oh, like the internal mechanics?
Yeah. Extreme, unprecedented cold snaps cause diesel fuel to gel. Hydraulic fluids in the heavy lifting equipment stiffen up, and at certain temperatures, the structural steel of the cranes and even the ships can actually become brittle.
Man, brittle steel on a giant crane sounds terrifying.
Right. If you can't operate the machinery safely, the whole port just gridlocks. Now, flooding currently only represents about 10% of the physical risk.
Exactly.
But the models show that after 2050, as sea levels rise and, extreme precipitation becomes the norm, flood risk is going to surge and become the dominant threat.
Right. And when you lay out numbers like $122 billion at risk, my mind immediately goes to ruined cargo. But a closed port ripples out much further than just the items sitting on the tarmac.
Oh, massively. The sources refer to this as the climate security nexus.
The climate security nexus.
Yeah, a port failure isn't a localized event, it's a systemic shock. If a major hub goes down, the global supply chain basically collapses.
Which we've seen happen recently.
Exactly. And that instantly threatens economic security, leading to volatile, unstable energy grids and food shortages. It also threatens human security, disrupting access to medical supplies and basic human needs.
Wow.
This is why port energy transition, or PET, is fundamentally viewed by these operators as a global security imperative.
So the industry knows the water is rising, the winds are accelerating, and their own operations are contributing to the very emissions causing the instability.
Exactly. They're stuck in a loop.
So how do you actually go about fixing the physical hardware of global trade? Let's look at what the industry calls container handling equipment, or CHE. We are talking about anywhere from 100,000 to 120,000 of these enormous machines spread across 940 global ports.
And the workload they handle is just immense. Annually, these machines move 815 million containers.
Millions.
Yes, representing over $8 trillion in value.
But the exhaust coming off that equipment is a massive problem, right? Like, moving those boxes around the yard generates 10 to 15 million tons of carbon dioxide every single year.
Which is a huge footprint.
Obviously, you want to electrify them, but the logistics of that seem nearly impossible. It sounds like they are trying to swap out the engine on a massive 18-wheeler while it's flying down the highway at 70 miles per hour. You can't just hit pause on $8 trillion of trade to run some extension cords.
It is a monumental logistical puzzle. But research from APM Terminals and DP World indicates we are rapidly approaching a commercial tipping point.
Okay, what kind of tipping point?
Well, based on their data, within just 2 to 8 years, battery electric container handling equipment will actually become cheaper to own and operate than traditional diesel machinery.
Wow, cheaper than diesel. But wait, let's follow the electricity here for a second. If we take 100,000 diesel engines offline, and we plug 100,000 massive electric vehicles into the local grid, if that grid is running on a coal or gas power plant, aren't we just shifting the emissions down the road?
Oh, that is the brilliant part. That is exactly why the leading operators aren't just electrifying the machines, they are fundamentally changing how they source their power.
Okay.
Take Jebel Ali in the UAE, one of the busiest terminals in the world. It isn't pulling dirty energy. It is now entirely powered by renewable energy supplied by the Dubai Electricity and Water Authority.
So the source is totally clean.
Exactly. They are also currently retrofitting 30% of their terminal tractors with electric components, and that's set to be completed by 2028. And beyond just swapping engines, they're completely rethinking spatial engineering with a system called Ba-Bay.
Oh yeah, this stood out in the sources.
Yeah.
Because the traditional way of storing shipping containers is essentially a giant, unstable game of block stacking.
Yes, exactly.
If you need a container that happens to be at the bottom of a stack, you have to burn energy moving like 5 other containers out of the way just to reach it.
It's incredibly inefficient. Ba-Bay solves this by building a fully automated, high-bay vertical storage rack.
Okay, how does that work?
Think of it like a highly organized, automated parking garage for shipping containers. Every single container sits in its own designated slot within this massive steel framework.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this system uses automated cranes moving on an X and Y axis to retrieve any specific box without ever having to move another one.
That dramatically cuts down the energy burned just shuffling things around all day.
Precisely. It runs entirely on solar power integrated right into its roof. It triples the storage capacity of a traditional yard, and it shrinks the terminal's physical footprint by up to 70%.
70%? That's wild.
And this level of innovation isn't isolated. Look at DP World Callao in Peru. They invested $105 million to decarbonize their operations. They built Latin America's first electric charging stations specifically for a port terminal.
That's a huge investment.
It is. And since May 2023, the entire terminal has been running on 100% clean energy. They didn't even wait for new equipment. They physically converted 10 of their existing rubber-tired gantry cranes from diesel to electric.
Those are those colossal bridge-like cranes that straddle the container lanes, right?
Exactly. And in Spain, the port of Santander just commissioned a first-of-its-kind hybrid service vessel named the Solia dos to handle maritime maintenance. The physical machinery of trade is literally being rebuilt from the inside out.
The engineering is truly remarkable. But, as we look at the capital required for all this, the millions spent on electric cranes and solar arrays, it's worth noting that one of the most impactful climate victories in these sources didn't require any new technology at all.
Yes.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We can spend billions engineering smarter equipment, but sometimes the biggest obstacle is just human habit. Let's talk about the move to -15.
Oh, this is a masterclass in challenging ingrained assumptions. For over a century, the universally accepted standard temperature for transporting frozen food across the oceans has been -18 degrees Celsius.
-18.
Right. And no one really knew why it was exactly -18. It was simply the industry rule.
Right, until the logistics company DP World, partnering with a coalition of academics, finally paused and asked a very basic question. Does it actually have to be that cold?
And the researchers tested the thermodynamics of the food and the shipping containers. They discovered that bumping the thermostat up by just 3 degrees, from -18 to -15 degrees Celsius, did absolutely no harm to the safety, texture, or quality of the food.
3 degrees sounds like a rounding error. But when you apply that to the millions of refrigerated containers circling the globe, the math is just staggering.
Oh, yeah.
That tiny shift saves 7% of the total energy used for refrigeration. Globally, that translates to preventing 17.7 million tons of carbon from entering the atmosphere every single year.
Is a massive.
To put that in perspective, that is the equivalent of removing 3.8 million cars from the road overnight. And it costs absolutely nothing. You just turn the dial up 3 degrees.
And the industry's reaction was completely unprecedented. When this initiative was launched at COP28, 60% of the global shipping industry signed on within days.
That kind of adoption speed is unheard of. But if the physics are this simple and it saves operators a fortune in energy costs without requiring any new equipment, why on earth did it take us 100 years to figure this out?
It comes down to risk aversion and the complex web of maritime insurance.
Ah, insurance.
Yeah. When you are transporting hundreds of millions of dollars of frozen seafood or produce, no single operator wants to be the one who experiments with the thermostat.
Because if a shipment spoils, the liability is catastrophic.
Exactly. So everyone defaults to the century-old standard because it's what the insurance underwriters expect. It took a coordinated effort between academics and a major logistics player to provide the empirical data needed to break that inertia.
It makes you wonder how many other century-old standards we are blindly following simply because no one wants to be the first to ask why. So we've optimized the machinery in the yard and we've optimized the temperature inside the boxes. But ports don't actually own the cargo.
Right, they are just middlemen.
Yeah, so how do you get the actual customers, the cargo owners, the brands whose logos are on the products, to actively care about cleaning up their supply chain?
That requires shifting the financial incentives, which is exactly what DP World UK is doing with their carbon inset program.
Okay, how does that work?
They are financially rewarding cargo owners with carbon certificates for every loaded import container they route through these upgraded UK terminals. And they recently quintupled the reward, taking it from 50 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per container up to 250 kilograms.
Wow, that's a big jump. But I want to highlight that specific term they use, insetting.
Mm-hmm.
We're all fairly familiar with carbon offsets at this point. A company generates a lot of emissions, so they buy a certificate that funds, like, a forest protection project halfway across the world. But insetting is fundamentally different, right?
It is.
It's happening directly inside their own supply chain.
Exactly. Offsetting is a compensatory measure. You emit here, you plant a tree there. Insetting is an absolute reduction at the source. The certificates these customers receive aren't based on planting trees. They are based on actual measurable reductions achieved during the transit of their own goods.
Okay, so how are they achieving those direct reductions?
By physically changing the fuel used in the final legs of the journey, they are utilizing lower carbon fuels on the unifeeder vessels that bring the cargo in, cleaner fuels on the Spitzer tugboats that guide those ships to the dock, and low carbon electricity running the terminal itself.
That's a comprehensive approach.
It targets over 90% of the emissions generated in that last nautical mile. The customer gets certified proof that their specific logistics network is operating cleaner.
It basically turns a vague sustainability goal into a tangible, auditable metric for the companies moving the goods. And speaking of the physical reality of shipping, we need to talk about the literal waste this industry generates, because the circular economy solutions happening in the background of these ports are absolutely wild. This is the ultimate one man's trash is another man's treasure scenario, but on a massive industrial scale.
Oh, absolutely. The transition from viewing waste as a liability to viewing it as a resource is a core theme in these sources. Let's look at Mexico. A company called Maritime Procurement Services, or MPS, is targeting maritime sludge.
And just to be clear, maritime sludge isn't just muddy water. It's the highly toxic, viscous residue left over in a ship's engine room. It's a nasty mix of heavy fuel oil, seawater, lubricants, and metal shavings.
It is incredibly difficult to dispose of safely.
Yeah, that.
But MPS has engineered a process to convert that toxic sludge into high-grade alternative fuel.
What's the mechanism there? How do you turn a toxic slurry into something an engine can actually burn?
It involves advanced thermal desorption and centrifugation.
Okay, science words.
Basically, they use heat and high-speed centrifugal force to strip away the water and the heavy particulate matter. What remains are the usable, combustible hydrocarbon chains.
Oh, wow.
And the resulting fuel is remarkably potent. It boasts a calorific value of over 10,000 kilocalories per kilogram, which actually burns hotter and more efficiently than petroleum coke.
That is incredible chemistry.
And crucially, when you evaluate the well-to-tank emissions, which measures the carbon footprint of extracting, refining, and transporting a fuel before it's even burned, this sludge-derived fuel reduces those emissions by 82 to 95% compared to virgin fossil fuels.
Because you aren't drilling a new well, you are refining the garbage from the last trip.
Exactly.
We see this exact same principle applied to heavy construction over in Spain. The Port of Santander needed to build a massive new dock extension. The standard operating procedure for that is to blast a quarry, mine thousands of tons of fresh rock, and truck it to the ocean to dump it in the water.
Which is obviously incredibly carbon intensive.
Right, but instead they utilized 13,000 cubic meters of green vitreous steel slag.
Slag is a byproduct of smelting raw metal, right?
Yes, it's the stony waste matter separated from metals during smelting. So by using it, they took 30,000 tons of industrial waste that would have otherwise sat in a landfill, and they repurposed its high load-bearing capacity to backfill the dock.
So they avoided mining fresh resources entirely.
Completely. And down in Uruguay, at the Port of Montevideo, they had a different kind of waste problem. They were expanding their fishing docks, which meant they had to dredge the harbor floor to make it deeper.
Right, but dredging stirs up decades of contaminated toxic mud. You can't just scoop it up and dump it further out at sea without destroying the local marine ecosystem.
No, you definitely can't. So they utilized advanced geotextile tubes.
Geotextile tubes, what are those?
They pumped the dredged slurry into these colossal, highly engineered polymer fabric tubes. The woven material is designed to act as a massive filter. It allows the clean water to slowly seep out while trapping all the toxic sediment and heavy metals safely inside.
That's really clever.
Yeah. The mud eventually dries out, and these giant tubes become solid structural foundations. They actually use these encapsulated tubes to create the new land for the port expansion itself.
It is a brilliant example of what the International Association of Dredging Companies calls nature-based solutions.
Nature-based solutions, I like that.
Yeah, because the historical approach was brute force, hard engineering, building concrete dams and dikes to bend the ocean to our will. The new paradigm is engineering that works with the ecosystem, safely isolating contaminants while building resilient infrastructure.
Everything is about closing the loop. But as we look at the engineering, the geotextile tubes, and the automated vertical racks, it's really vital to remember that a port does not exist in a vacuum. It sits squarely within a coastal ecosystem and a human community.
This is a critical point. The sources make it very clear that if this energy transition only serves the shipping conglomerates and fails to elevate the local communities, it isn't a sustainable model. We have to look beyond just the steel and the carbon accounting.
Yeah. Guatemala provides a perfect example of integrating with the natural ecosystem. The Empresa Portuaria Quetzal isn't just managing concrete docks. They actively maintain 337 hectares of forest directly on port property.
It's a huge area, and that forest serves a distinct operational purpose, right? It naturally absorbs over 4,000 tons of greenhouse gases every year.
Yes. And what's truly remarkable is that this natural carbon sink actually outabsorbs the port's own operational emissions by 37%.
So the port is operating as a net negative carbon sink.
Exactly. And when we look at community integration, the Dominican Republic really stands out. The Dominican Port Authority realized that focusing solely on massive container ships ignores the people who actually live on the coast.
Right, the local fishermen.
Yeah, so they launched a massive project to upgrade the country's artisanal fishing docks. These were historically neglected, highly vulnerable areas. They didn't just rebuild the wooden piers, though. They installed modern infrastructure with integrated solar panels, established proper waste collection protocols to protect the mangroves, and built dedicated spaces for processing and marketing the daily catch.
The economic ripple effect of something like that must be huge.
It is. This initiative has positively impacted over 4,000 local families and boosted overall fishing productivity by 35%. They even created a national logistics council to orchestrate this strategy nationwide, basically ensuring the entire country benefits from becoming a green logistics hub.
We see a similar dedication to the surrounding environment in Colombia, where the Compass Port Network achieved a highly coveted zero-waste gold certification.
Zero waste at a port.
Yeah, they have monetized their recycling streams and successfully diverted 1,788 tons of organic waste away from landfills. Instead, they donate it to be used for composting and animal feed.
That's amazing. And all of these individual efforts, the clean energy, the waste reduction, the community integration, they all culminate in what is happening in Ecuador. The Guayaquil Port Terminal, or TPG, didn't just lower their emissions.
Right.
Through a combination of optimizing their fuels, aggressively deploying low-emission technology, and rigorously offsetting whatever small footprint remained, they officially achieved verified carbon neutrality under the strict ISO 14064 standards.
What's fascinating here is that it serves as absolute proof of concept. A massive, bustling logistics hub handling thousands of tons of cargo daily can operate at net zero right now.
Right now.
It destroys the old narrative that economic development and environmental protection are mutually exclusive. They are entirely interdependent.
So what does this all mean for you? We started this deep dive looking at a terrifying premise. $122 billion of global trade threatened by freezing gears, rising waters, and howling winds.
Yeah, a system on the brink.
We looked at an industry that was historically one of the dirtiest on Earth, burning heavy fuel and treating the ocean as a dumping ground.
But the reality uncovered in these sources is an industry aggressively pivoting from being the source of the problem to becoming a catalyst for the solution.
They are stripping diesel engines out of colossal cranes and replacing them with batteries. They are challenging century-old assumptions about how cold a freezer needs to be, erasing millions of tons of carbon with just the turn of a dial.
And they are spinning toxic engine sludge into high-performance fuel and using their own industrial waste to build the foundations of tomorrow's docks.
They are physically rewiring the mechanics of global trade. And there is one recurring theme buried in these corporate strategies that is absolutely fascinating.
What's that?
As these ports install massive solar arrays, as they integrate sprawling battery storage systems to run their operations, and as they build facilities to manufacture green fuels from waste, their identity is fundamentally shifting. They are generating massive amounts of clean power.
Wow. Yeah, they are.
So here's a final thought for you to consider today. If this trajectory continues, could the ports of tomorrow stop being just the industrial zones where our stuff is dropped off? Could these massive logistical hubs actually evolve into the primary green power plants for the coastal cities that surround them?
That is a profound shift in how we view urban infrastructure.
It really is.
Thank you for exploring it with us today.
Yeah, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. The next time you look at the objects around your room, remember the incredible evolving green network that brought them to you. Stay insanely curious, and we'll catch you next time.